For me, it's about moving with structure, discipline, and speed. And I think, that's what we've been achieving. There's an extremely competent team. There's 3 PhDs for a company of our size. That is quite significant to have such a strong team supporting the process. But it is about, de-risking the flow sheet, validating our process, and really moving forward as we transition from them and being an explorer now really into this development space. And I think Jupiter, at the end of the day, it's one of the largest clay-hosted rare earth projects out there. We are emerging as a cornerstone for building this secure and Western-aligned, rare earth supply chain. And I think this was an exceptional result, a clear step forward in our quest as we move our project forward and become Australia's next rare earth developer.
Well, hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar with Critica Ltd. I'm Dannika Warburton, the Investor Relations Representative for Critica, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Jacob Deysel, who is the CEO of Critica and is here to share some very exciting news that was announced today that the first mixed rare earth product has been produced from the Jupiter project in WA. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Jacob.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dannika, and welcome everyone. And it's absolutely a delight to be talking to you this morning. From our perspective, yes, this is quite a pivotal milestone for Jupiter and our development path of Jupiter in Western Australia. So it is the production of our first mixed rare earth product. And I think this really, for me, is kind of marking this move from being pure concept to proof. And it's proving up that beneficiation-first flow sheet and being able to produce a high-quality oxide product. And I think that's really a differentiator, is the fact that we can beneficiate up front. Now, to just talk through this a little bit, we've gone through a very systematic process here, step by step. And it's been disciplined, scaled up throughout this with the intention of really de-risking the project at each of these stages. And it started off firstly with a 50-kilogram laboratory scale test work that was conducted. And that firstly shown that the Jupiter ore is really amenable to this upgrading. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. We then followed that up with a larger scale bulk sample, which was a 400 kilogram. And that showed that we can consistently reduce the mass by 95%. Now, this is quite different from what our competitors are doing. So in a mining kind of set, if you can reduce your mass very quickly up front, it means everything downstream, you've reduced your footprint. And that is where there's potential significant benefits from a capital and Opex perspective. And that's what we've been able to achieve, but also consistently this upgrade from, between 6 and 10 times as far as the grade is concerned. Now, what we've done is from this 400 kilogram sample, we've produced this intermediate concentrate, which is a high-grade intermediate concentrate. Then that was then divided. We did some test work at GAVAQ. The same of that sample was then shipped out to ANSTO in Australia, as well as Munitech AMML here in Australia. And we've run a number of parallel hydrometallurgical work streams to produce this mixed rare earth product. Now, GAVAQ we chose specifically because it's Vietnam-based, but Vietnam has got an enormous amount of experience in rare earths, and they have gone through the whole process, not just purely mining them, but actually extracting and producing individual oxides. And GAVAQ has been established. I mean, they run since in excess of 20 years experience, but they are end to end. So they actually run all the way from resource right through to the production of rare earths. And they are also producing equipment in the space. So there's enormous experience in GAVAQ, and that's why we've chosen them to at least assist us with the front section, and that's where the pilot plant is as well, that I'll talk a little bit more about. But also they were the first to produce a mixed rare earth product whilst we're running with the rest of the streams in parallel. Now, the next step for us is this 3,000. So we start 50 50 kilograms, 400, and we're now scaling that up to a 3,000 kilogram, which is this pilot scale. It's been constructed in Vietnam at GAVAQ, and we soon be commissioning that, starting feeding that material through, which will produce more of this intermediate product and then assist us to do further essential optimization of these various streams when it comes to the production. But let's talk about the actual product, because this is really the key reason for the conversation today. And this product that we've produced is an 84% total rare earth oxide, so exceptional in terms of the rare earth content at a 78% extraction or recovery. Now, to put that in context, normal mixed rare earth products around the market is sitting around the 40 to 60% TREO. So this is exceptionally in the sense that we've got 84% TREO level. And more importantly, if you look at the magnet rare earths, which carries this 80 to 90% of the basket value of most of these projects, in our resource, we're sitting at about 25% or thereabouts. Our mixed rare earth product, we got about 23% of that. So it means we've recovered most of our magnet rare earths into our final product. So I think that's a key piece to just note, and a great outcome from that. Now, in terms of where we are now, the next steps is just to talk more about how this product was produced. So that intermediate concentrate was essentially leached, and we used a very standard acid bake process to produce this high purity oxide with very low impurity levels. And to me, this really shows that we've de-risked the back end now of our flow sheet. So we've shown that the front section, which is a real differentiator in the sense that we can beneficiate up front, we produced this intermediate concentrate, and we've been able to take that through the process and now produce a commercial ready type of mixed rare earth product. Next steps for us in terms of catalyst here, having this product now, it allows us to start having some conversations with off-takers. Now, we've been talking to off-takers, of course. They are aware of the project, and things that have stood out specifically for us is the fact that we've got enormous scale and this beneficiation piece up front, meaning that our geology fits very well with the metallurgy. But it's now a position where we could actually start talking about the specific product that we've produced and start comparing some of those specifications. So that's a key piece for us as the next step. Other catalyst is obviously the commissioning of our of this pilot plant at GAVAQ to produce more intermediate concentrate. That material will then feed through, again, GAVAQ and Munitech in terms of parallel processes to optimize. So this was only an initial product. It was one stream, one specific process we followed. We are following a number of processes here, alternatives to come up with what's the most economic and best route for us to move forward. So we'll continue with that process. And then in parallel with that, we will start off, obviously the next step for us that is quite key is start talking about scoping study. All of this information is going to feed into that. Now, I'm sure a lot of our shareholders and listeners, would like to start talking about economics and all of that. But that is really what the scoping study is about. The scoping study is putting all of this together and start talking about that. So it's difficult at this moment in time to really talk economics because we just haven't had the work that's fed into that. And beyond then the scoping study. So in terms of timelines, we want to finish scoping study before the middle of next year, and then move into a pre-feasibility study probably in the second half of next year. So each of these steps are really measured. I think the announcements set them out as well in terms of timeline. They're structured and aligned in terms of value creation really moving forward. So I'll probably stop there in terms of my conversation and rather open the floor. I'm sure there's some questions around what we've been achieving and what we've done so far.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jacob. And thank you to everyone who submitted a question via the Zoom registration page. There was, about 20 that came through, so I'll run through them now. Firstly, this is one from Simon. He's asked, how does your beneficiation-first approach cut plant size, Opex and Capex and footprint versus a direct leach approach?
Very good. Thanks, Simon. That's a very appropriate and very good question. And I think, I came into Critica just over 3 months ago, and probably one of the key things that attracted me to Jupiter and the asset specifically is the fact that we can beneficiate up front, and we've now proven that we can do that. So what that means really is that very early on, if you had to compare this to, let's compare this to our ionic clay piece. If you mine 1 million tons, you have to leach 1 million tons. So your footprint in terms of leaching is for 1 million tons. Now, it might be more benign because it's a slightly different geology, but the footprint remains 1 million tons. The fact that we can reduce very early after mining, we can reduce the mass by 95% and upgrade the grade to this intermediate concentrate, which means that if I mine 1 million tons from Jupiter, we only have to leach 50,000 tons. That's what it means. And that footprint goes with that. So if you start thinking about, Opex and Capex, and again, I'll put the proviso in, we have to do the scoping study, so I can't go into what that is, but just from first principles, the fact of the matter is you've got a smaller footprint, which means there's potential for lower Capex here. But because of that smaller footprint, the smaller volumes that you have to deal with, you've got lower reagent levels, you've got lower water usage, lower energy usage, and that's bound to be, therefore, a lower Opex kind of structure. And that's what we hope to set out and prove in the feasibility, in the scoping study. But to me, there's a few data points that point to the fact that we have, absolutely framework here to move forward on a relative efficient build for this project.
Mm-hmm. And so when you're looking in the pilot, what accounts as success and what variables are you tuning going forward?
Yeah. So again, if you look at the pilot, so there's a pilot plant, as we mentioned, that's being constructed at GAVAQ and will commission very soon. And that is really the pilot of the front section. So it's the beneficiation piece. So, and it's very benign equipment. It's stock standard magnetic separation and flotation. And we're going to do that at a larger scale. And if you recall previously, we've been talking about recoveries. The previous announcement, our recoveries ranged, and we said the key for us at that stage was really to focus on the grade, because it was an open circuit. So when you do this on a laboratory scale, you don't recirculate load, so you get all these tails and they still have mineral in them, but you don't bring them back into the circuit to recover those. In the closed circuit, this pilot scale, we're going to actually now have a closed circuit, and we've got an ability to now optimize the recovery. So that's exciting work for us as well. So for me, what is the success level here? Well, it's consistency, right? Because we want to show that we can consistently deliver this at a larger commercial type scale pilot. Now, we've done that with the bulk sample. Now we're going to do it with this pilot scale plant, and it's going to be, we want to get that 95% reduction, which we've shown we can do. The next step is that upgrade in 6 to 10 times. We've shown that we can do that. I want to now optimize the recoveries, right? So that's going to be our focus there, and that's really the success piece for us as far as the pilot plant is concerned, is how that intermediate product that we produce at the end, what's the grade and recoveries of that?
Brilliant, thank you. And Shane has asked in the Q&A, how soon will the pilot plant be commissioned? You mentioned soon. Is there any sort of timings that you can?
Yeah, look, it's you would have seen the photo, Shane. A good question. I like it when there's really people getting interested about, well, when are you going to do this? I like that. But there's photos of the pilot plant. So we are so what you have a few things in terminology. When you commission, there's a cold commission, which means all the pieces of kit is in, and we're going through that. Then you get hot commissioning, and that's when you start getting electricity connected, and you get water and all of that running through it. So that's where we are now. And then you go into proper commissioning when you start putting feed through it. So, I would say we're probably a week or two away from getting to a point of putting feed through this. And then, that's probably going to run for a few months in any case, in terms of getting, the process stable, and then run through and optimize that product. So I hope that answers the question.
Brilliant. And so moving on to your magnet rare earth mix, John's actually asked, does GAVAQ actually produce magnets? And second part to that question, is there any scope in the future for producing magnets in Australia?
Yeah, look, so I think there's a few steps in between there. So in terms of when you think about, you get a mixed rare earth oxide. So that mixed rare earth oxide is what we're producing, or mixed rare earth product, let's rather call it that. And that's got all of the oxides of the 17 individual rare earths is contained in this material, right? And then you want to pull that apart. So that's the next step. And that's kind of what, if you look at Iluka, which is just, building a refinery 260 kilometers from us, they will take our product essentially and then pull that apart into the individual oxides. And then it's those individual oxides that then get processed. So individual metals, essentially, that gets processed further into magnet production. So in terms of Vietnam, I think they go all the way to oxide production. I don't think there's specific magnet manufacturing capabilities there. Will Australia move into that field? Well, I think the West is building this supply chain, and we've got now option really. If you think about China controls 70% of mining, 90% of processing, and probably about 95 or 98% of magnet manufacturing. So, but these are very complex processes. They go through a lot of stages. We are scratching the surface in terms of Lanus and Iluka in terms of producing the individual oxides. And there will be capacity eventually be built in the West. So I would think that in Australia we're going to move forward in being able to put that magnet piece together. But the West is very far behind, and I think we saw what happened this morning in the market. Everyone feels that China's going to delay embargoes, and that's great for us. The risk is, and what I would rather say to the market is, the market should double down now, because we've got the opportunity to get ahead here, and we should really focus on building the supply chain. And of course, Jupiter is a key cornerstone, I believe, to that supply chain.
Mm. Yes, a dreadful day on markets to be releasing good news, but great news in any case. And I guess talking to what you just said about positioning, I guess future positioning with Offtake or potential strategic partners or potential acquirers or anything along those lines, is there anything that you can fill us in on that, or is it too preliminary at this stage?
It's probably a little bit preliminary, as I mentioned. So I think one of the other key pieces that stands out for me about Jupiter and Critica and our asset, the brothers' asset, is that it's in a tier 1 location in WA. So our shareholders, compared to some of our competitors, we are infrastructure rich. We don't have to build roads. There's power lines already there. There's a gas line there. So we've got energy. We've got a rail line that connects us straight to the Geraldton port. So there's a significant infrastructure there that we don't have to actually supply or build, right? And I think that to me is a key piece. But where I was going with that is, the other aspect is we've got 2 downstream refineries, very close proximity to us, right? Now, we have to obviously sit down and have conversations, and we need to work with them to get to a specification that potentially might work or not. But we're in a very ideal position to have refineries very close to us that's potential off-takers. But we've got to a point now. This was the first milestone of producing a mixed rare earth product, get some specifications that we can go and sit down and have meaningful conversations. And a lot of our competitors have conversations and they have all these non-binding letter of intents. That doesn't really add value. We want to have meaningful conversations. And this is the first time now that we can go and do that. So that is the next step, but that's probably as much as I can share at the moment.
Okay, thank you. And Simon has commented that 78% mixed rare earth oxide recovery is good. What is the NdPr and DyTb percentages and grades?
Yeah, so exactly. So the 78% recovery, the actual TREO levels is 84%. Now, usually how you measure that is you would say, so what is your magnet rare earth percentage as a ratio of that 84%? And in our case, that's 23%, right? And that's made up of your NdPr, your neodymium praseodymium, which are the two main ones, and then the two ones that's a bit more rare is dysprosium and terbium, and they're very similar to what we've announced before in our reserve and resource. In our resource, they're very similar, and we've seen that recovery pulling through. So it's the same numbers.
Okay. And I've got a question on sort of government programs. I know that recently you announced the R&D grant, but Paul's asked, Jacob, now that we have proven mixed rare earth product, will we be entitled for government funding for further government grants?
Yeah. No, thanks, Paul. And that is really something that we are looking at very closely. I mean, it's a very good question. There's a lot of funds being made available by governments at the moment. And just I'll answer that more clearly. But I think the main problem we have, if you look at the West, is we have to build a supply chain. And supply chains, to build a supply chain takes decades or longer, right? Unless you've got the right projects. And for those projects, you need to have the right geology, the right scale, simplicity in the flow sheet. And I think there's not many projects that tick all of those lists. So I think the fact that we have now we've gone the beneficiation route. We've shown that that works. We've now produced the back end. We've de-risked the flow sheet all the way to a mixed rare earth product. That's putting us in a position where we can show that we have one of these tier one projects here, enormous scale, simplicity in the flow sheet, a de-risk flow sheet. And therefore, if there's projects that's going to start to attract funding, I think we are one of those, on top of the list. Now, we have to move forward. We've received some R&D funding back. We have engaged a specific group to specifically look at how we develop the project and which grant funding pieces is available as we move forward with these catalysts. So absolutely, I know I could have answered that question much shorter, but yeah, we are looking at it. We are going to see, at each of these stages, what grants are available. We are working with, you would have seen some announcements already that we are working very closely on grant funding. So that will move forward and will speed up now that we have this de-risk flow sheet.
Okay. And do you have any comments on sort of the macro backdrop or the policy tailwinds? I guess you sort of touched on it, but between US and Australia, does that play into any of your considerations or not at this point? You're just progressing the project and all eyes on execution.
No, I think, it goes back to what I mentioned. I think the West need to build a supply chain. I mean, what we've seen in the market today, yes, I think it's just a short-term dip here. The realization is that the West is extremely vulnerable, extremely exposed. And, this has happened in the past and will happen again, that China will weaponize this, right? So we have to build a supply chain. So there's no question around that. And I think, projects that's really going to stand out are projects that tick all the boxes. And I think Jupiter ticks all of those boxes. And therefore, we are absolutely set to be a cornerstone in Western supply chain when it comes to these critical rare earths. And therefore, I think this alliance between, the US, Europe, Korea, and specifically Australia. I mean, Australia has long been seen as an ally in the supply of critical metals and minerals. And a project like Jupiter is going to stand out. And I think, this is absolutely, as I mentioned, a cornerstone to the supply chain. And I think it's exciting to see that there's so much interest and that the West is actually having policies that's pulling together, understand that funds need to be made available, incentive pricing is needed, and we see that filtering through now. So it's all very exciting stuff for us.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for that. And Joel has asked a question. I think it may have been cut off earlier, just on the timeline for project and your operational schedule and perhaps upcoming catalysts. Would you just be able to summarize that again for us?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think probably the first piece here is the question was asked about the pilot plant. So we're commissioning pilot plant soon, and that's going to produce. So that's the first part. That's going to produce more intermediate concentrate. So that's going to happen over the next 3 to 4 months, maybe a bit longer. All of that intermediate concentrate will then feed into these parallel streams. So we'll continue to run optimization streams on mixed rare earth product production through ANSTO, Munitech, AMML, and GAVAQ. So we will continue with that process. And again, it's probably my longest piece of string is going to continue over the next 6 months or so. All of that information feeds into the scoping study. And we're going to kick off the scoping study. There's some work we want to do on the resource. We want to do a little bit of drilling there to just take us from inferred to indicated. The scoping study will then feed all of this information in, and that's going to start putting this concept more into, taking it to the next level so we can start to build the economics around this. And then once that's finished, and the target, I set for myself and my team is that we want to get that delivered before the middle of next year. And then that will move into a pre-feasibility, or at least initiate the pre-feasibility at the middle of, the second half of next year. And then while all of this happens, some of the key pieces for us is while all this optimization and work happen in the background, is having these engagements with off-takers and, start developing that relationship and understand the specifications as we optimize. So those are probably, just a very short kind of summary of the
brilliant
catalysts.
Thank you. I can see we're almost out of time. So, and you've been very, very busy since you started 3 months ago. So I'm sure there will be lots of opportunities ahead to have more webinars and speak with investors. But I guess to wrap up with, did you have any final comments that you'd like to leave investors and shareholders on the call with today?
Yeah, look, I think, and thanks again for everyone to take the time to speak to us today. It's great, and we should do this more often. I think it's great to get, and the questions has been fantastic. For me, it's about moving with structure, discipline, and speed, and I think that's what we've been achieving. There's an extremely competent team. There's 3 PhDs for a company of our size. That is quite significant to have such a strong team supporting the process. But it is about de-risking the flow sheet, validating our process, and really moving forward as we transition from being an explorer now really into this development space. And I think Jupiter, at the end of the day, it's one of the largest clay-hosted rare earth projects out there. We are emerging as a cornerstone for building this secure and Western-aligned, rare earth supply chain. And I think this was an exceptional result, a clear step forward in our quest as we move our project forward and become Australia's next rare earth developer. And thank you very much for all the investor support. Really appreciate that, and keep watching this space.
Thank you, Jacob, and thank you to everyone who's just sent through some wonderful questions, congratulating you on an excellent result and saying thank you for the hard work. We'll wrap it up there. If we didn't get to your question, please do feel free to email Jacob or myself. Contact details are on the bottom of the ASX announcements, and we'll be happy to answer any questions we didn't get to. Thanks, Jacob.
Thank you very much. Bye.